Mr Acting Deputy President, on 25 April every year since World War I, Australians have gathered to remember those who lost their lives in war and those who served this great country. So I thought it was fitting that I also speak about the contribution animals have made to our Anzac story. A short time after midnight on the 2nd of March 1942, after fierce fighting, the HMAS Perth, along with USS Houston, were sunk in the Battle of Battle of the Sunda Strait. Of the 354 lives lost from the Perth, one was the ship's red lead. We know this because at the end of the war, those survivors who lived through Japanese imprisonment were able to confirm this. It is not known if he survived the battle to drown as the ship went down, struggling to stay afloat, if he'd laid there on the deck injured or dying with his shipmates, or was killed outright. Like so many sailors, we just will never know what this cat's final minutes were like. But we do know that he shared death with many of the shipmates. Interestingly, the log of the HMAS Perth showed that Red Lead had tried to leave or desert the ship 3 times just prior to sailing to its fate. Each time a sailor stopped him and returned him to the ship. The log read, Red Lead's ship kitten endeavoured to desert but was brought back on board despite vigorous protests. Today's HMAS Perth has a painting of Red Lead in the bridge, a fitting memorial to an animal who shared the life and dangers of a sailor. Animals have been with our armed forces as either working animals or as mascots, and many a time they have shared the same fate as their human mates. We all know the story of Simpson and his donkey Murphy, but he was not the only donkey that carried wounded to the beach. We know of at least 2 others, one of Bert Latrobe of the 1st Australian Field Ambulance and the other with Dick Henderson of the New Zealand Medical Corps. There were horses who survived and were considered fit enough to be sold in the Indian Army during World War I. There are plenty of stories of the stress felt by those light horsemen leaving the horse that had faithfully carried them. One of our former senators, Major General Harold Pompey Elliott, left behind his trusted mount in England after he served him well in Europe during World War I. He was so distressed that he had done this. He left a note with his horse Darky, outlining his service as a trusted mount. He was delighted later to receive a letter from the new owner assuring him that Darky was being cared for. At the end of Australian involvement in Vietnam, the Australian Army left behind 11 Labradors, tracking dogs due to quarantine regulations and attitudes of the time. I am, like most Australians, happy to see that today's animals such as Sabi are returned to Australia. We no longer see other shameful acts of animals being treated badly due to quarantine issues back home. Some animals, such as a small dog called Hori during the North African campaign in World War II, did not serve as either a working animal or mascot, but became a pet of some of the soldiers. So why do, Mr Acting Deputy President, servicemen and women become attached to animals while on the battlefield? Well, no doubt. Some were taken in by soldiers out of sheer human decency because they were hungry and abandoned. But what did they offer in return? Often in the battlefield, cats and kittens were adopted by troops, and cats have performed other essential roles as raising morale. With their amusing and affectionate behaviour, they help remind men and women far from Australia of normal life and the comforts of home. I could name many other animals that went to war either as working animals or mascots or pets. There are names of animals that are known to us, but there are many more who are unknown, but were no less important to those who served with. I've become fortunate to have met a man called Nigel Allsop, who leads an organisation called Australian War Animal Memorial Organisation. And I congratulate Nigel on his efforts to share the story of our war animals, and I support his endeavours to ensure Australians appreciate and understand the contribution to our war efforts. I conclude, Mr Acting Deputy President, with the words from the Australian War Memorial Organisation. Throughout history, in war and peacetime, animals and mankind have worked alongside with each other as beasts of burden, messengers, protectors,
Senator
mascots
Lindgren,
and
your time
friends.
has elapsed. Senator Singh.